Hi, hello, watch fans, and welcome to another episode of The Real Time Show with me, your friendly neighborhood watchmaker, Rob Nuds, and my co-host, Alon Ben Joseph. Today, we are diving back into the mailbag, a very full mailbag, bursting at the seams, as they say, to find some of your more interesting questions and hopefully light-hearted topics, which we will address today. Alon, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, buddy. How are you? And I've been listening to you. You're not friendly, and you're not a neighborhood watchmaker. So why do you always say that in the intro?
It's a joke. It's a Spider-Man joke. I don't know where it came from or why I started doing it, but it's just become like, hang on a second. What do you mean I'm not friendly?
Well,
I'm friendly to some people, just not you.
That's true. Honestly, we have our real-time show network, and you're very friendly to all our members in that group. But to me, you're not that nice.
Yeah, well, they haven't had a chance to piss me off yet. So,
That's true. No. So I'm sorry. So I think it's going to be that kind of an episode. Sorry, dear listeners. So sorry, Rob. I was asking how you're doing.
Oh, I'm fine, thanks. Maybe I should start up my own little neighborhood watchmaking clinic so that I can say it and mean it rather than just saying it and, I don't know.
It's actually very interesting because I listened to the start of the McGonagall episode. It was actually interesting how you guys were bouncing off each other. Ireland, Manchester, la la la. I was living there. I was born 1 year before you started, da 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 da. And then the coincidence of the McGonagall brothers working in Switzerland while the Grenfell brothers were there. So it was very cool. And now you're in Dresden near Glasgow. You should actually seriously do that.
Yeah, you're probably right. I should. Talking to John McGonagall, last night, when are we recording today? Well, it's the 24th of Feb, so we're a week and a bit ahead of when this episode goes out. I was listening last night on the 23rd to John McGonagall's lecture that he gave for the engineers of Ireland, and that was really fascinating stuff. It was about an hour long, I think, and it was fascinating. It was really great. It was a great listen, and if it's still available online, I think, if anyone hasn't seen it, go check it out. Go seek out John's teachings because, he's a fascinating dude to listen to and got a lot of experience to share with the community. It was a real pleasure to have him on as well.
Such a modest, friendly guy, good sense of humor. And if you think about it, he's actually, both brothers are living legends in the watch industry. I think they're so down to earth, but I don't think that people realize the recognition they get, but I don't think people realize how amazing they are.
No, and it's easy to sort of let even modern greats like that slip out of the limelight because they don't put themselves in it too often. And watchmaking, it's one of those industries that really rewards people that like to self-promote, like me.
Actually, very interesting question for you, and I'm doing this on air because you and I are running at such high speeds for the real-time show that we don't always know what the other is doing for the show. You invited John. Did you have to twist his arm, or was he okay to come on?
Actually, it was a very painless process, and I don't know John personally, or I didn't know John personally. I think we struck up quite a rapport now, so hopefully we'll get the chance to hang out sooner rather than later. And I offered to represent him at an event in Ireland should he not be able to make it himself, because I'm so taken by Elon and his new watches. I thought,
are you taken by me?
Am I taken by you?
Yeah, you said Alon. I'm so taken by Alon, you said.
Oh, God, not this again. Okay, I don't know what you're hearing, right? But it doesn't sound anything like your name.
I think there's something wrong with your mic.
No, it's nothing wrong with my microphone. It's Elon, not Alon.
Anyway. You know, the Americans used to call me when I lived there. Hey,
Elon.
No, they would call me alone. And then I would reply, but I'm not alone. And then they would look confuzzled at me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm standing here with you. And then they wouldn't get my joke. So I would just quickly move on.
Yeah, probably. Because they probably thought they'd just clubs you in with like a generic Europeans and, committed some incredible offensive act. I like John and I like Elon watches, and I also like the work he did with his brother Stephen on McGonagall watches. And I was quite interested in McGon watches, Stephen's other brand, his more accessible brand, which is still 5 figures, fair enough, but the lower end of that spectrum. And there's some pretty cool stuff there. They're kind of like that. I don't want to make this sound bad. A bit Frank Mullerish is what I was going to say in terms of the case shape. But I like them more than I like Frank Muller's, and I like very much the green rotor on those watches. I think it's tough, because Irish imagery, like symbols, icons, they're a bit heavy-handed sometimes with like the clover and the harp and the leprechauns, etc., etc. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult to sort of take a lot of the Irish art and execute it in a way that doesn't feel like you're being bashed over the head with it. Like Celtic crosses and Celtic knotwork and whatnot. Like if you put that on a rotor, it's a bit cheap and a bit like, So I think the green is an obvious one. You can pull the green, and use that in watchmaking, and that works really well. It's not too offensive or in your face, and maybe a bit of green and gold works nicely as well, because I know the flag is orange, but it's gold.
It's actually very interesting for you to mention that, because I've actually been thinking a lot about his design, John McGonagall's design.
Yeah,
and it's actually a contemporary take on very iconic Irish design features. So that's very interesting for you to say that. Do me a favor, Rob. You said it so quickly, the second brand of Stephen McGonagall. How do you spell it for our listeners?
Magon.
Okay.
Magon.
Magon. Okay, amazing. And we need to have Stephen on the show for sure. Rob, we are leaving the beaten path. We need to go back to the mailbag. Should I pick the first one?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I was actually very excited when yesterday LVMH announced that they're reviving their dormant brand, Daniel Roth.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of that?
So it's coming back as part of the group.
Just a bit of a backstory. By the way, Jeremy from London sent me this question. He said, what did you chaps think of LVMH reviving Daniel Roth as a brand? To get our listeners up to speed, Daniel Roth is a living legend. He's still alive. Back in the day, he sold the brand to the Hourglass Group, the Tay family, amazing people, huge watch collectors, amazing retailers. They also bought the Gerald Genta brand back in the day. They owned both. Today, a publicly listed company, the Hourglass Group, in Singapore. They decided to focus back on retail and not being a brand or a watch manufacturer. They were good friends with the Bulgari family back in the day before LVMH owned them. They sold the Gerald Genta brand and Daniel Roth brands to Bulgari Group. Bulgari was already making their own watches in Neuchâtel in Switzerland since already, I believe, the 70s, early 80s. So it was a strategic fit, a natural fit. It is important to mention that both Mr. Gerald Genta, today late Mr. Gerald Genta, did not join that brand. They left very early on when they sold the brand. Same goes for Mr. Daniel Roth, who's still alive today. Gerald Genta went on designing watches for brands, but he also started a second watch brand called Gerald Charles. Mr. Roth, I think, also started a second brand, Rob, but you need to help me out there.
Yeah, that one's called Jean Daniel Nicholas.
So he's still up and running an Atelier brand. So what happened? Bulgari incorporated both brand names, Gerald Genta and Daniel Roth. At a certain point, they blended it into the Bulgari brand. Then you had these brands operating as calibers, and then they vanished completely. Then Bulgari 2-3 years ago revived the typical iconic Gerald Genta watches with the retrograde and jumping hour hands with Disney figures on it, which are cool. They brought them back. They did well. And now the interesting thing happened. As you might know, the Arnault family is the biggest shareholder of LVMH, and the youngest generation, which are 5 kids, they are all very active within the group. Most recently, the 2 elder kids, son and daughter, are on the fashion side of things. And the 3 younger boys, who have a different mother than the first 2, are all in the watchmaking segment of LVMH. So we have Alexandre, who went from Rimowa to Tiffany, and we've discussed this extensively on this show, because he was active when the Patek Philippe 5711 collab with Tiffany was launched. Then we have Frédéric Arnault, who is the CEO of Tag Heuer. And the last one is Jean Arnault. He's the baby of the family. And he made his first steps in the watchmaking industry at the watchmaking division of Louis Vuitton, so LV. And the interesting thing is, Maître du Temps, which was an independent horlogerie watch brand, got bought fully by LVMH, and they make 100% of the high complication calibers and watches for LV. Now, interestingly enough, they did a reshuffling within the group and the family. And Jean already gave a hint in one of the interviews a few months ago, and I believe that was the New York Times, that he wanted to revive Daniel Roth. I guess he got his way. Yesterday, they announced that in 2023, we'll see one piece, 20 pieces limited edition in 2023, fully made by Maître du Temps division of LVMH. It's not clear yet who's going to be at the helm of this brand. Sorry for the long intro. Rob, what do you think?
Well, maybe Daniel Roth himself will make a return. I mean, he hasn't been part of the company for quite some time. I think he officially left in 2000.
Oh, that would be amazing. I didn't even think about that. That's a curveball.
Not impossible, is it? I mean, a lot has happened since he departed. I think he sold off like his management stake in the mid to late 90s of the company, but remained involved until Bulgari picked it up, and then obviously Bulgari was subsequently bought by LVMH. So I don't really get the wording of the announcement, and I've read a few articles on all of our major media sites out there, like A Blog to Watch and Hodinkee, and I was comparing the terminologies used, and they're quite similar. So they're obviously taken from the official announcement, and they're trying to sort of spin it that it will return as an independent brand with the support of Louis Vuitton, Le Fabrique de Temps. I don't really get what they're trying to say. Like, to me, it just sounds like, oh, they're reviving the name. It's part of the group. It's going to be, retreading the ground for which the brand was known and respected under its own label. And I think it's great. I think it's a nice brand. It has an identifiable look, and the cases may be an acquired taste, but for my money, it's a taste worth acquiring. And if Daniel Roth himself were to return, that would be a beautiful, beautiful end to his time away from the eponymous brand. So, yeah.
That would be amazing. Really full circle. And you know what? I think it's not such a weird thought or idea you have, because something big happened as well within the LVMH group, which is not maybe that relevant for our podcast. But I do find it interesting because Pharrell, I think, is an amazing musician and producer, but he's a big watch nerd. And he took the role that late Virgil Abloh left behind. So what that says is LVMH does bring on board the big guns. So that could maybe be an interesting vision you've been sharing here. Very curious to see what happens.
Yeah, me too. I mean, we'll watch it with interest as it develops, because it's not often you see this. I mean, LVMH is known really for picking up brands that are motoring along and doing nicely and can add something to the portfolio. It's unusual to see them take a brand that was shelved and pull it back to life, but I think it's cool. I mean, you always say the more choice, the better. It's only a good thing for watchmaking lovers, and yeah, I think it's going to meet with success. The reaction so far in the community seems to be broadly positive from what I've heard.
So do I, and I was visiting my buddy Roy Davidoff in his boutique in Geneva. I believe it was last month, and no, actually in December. Sorry, so 2 months ago, and super cool because exactly when I came in, he just received a fresh, new old stock Daniel Roth, sealed in plastic still. That was amazing. So I put that up on my Instagram as well. So it was almost a sign on the wall. I think it will do well. And I'm happy that the Arnault family is doing it, actually. It seems that they are very deeply invested in watchmaking. And it's cool to see that actually the younger generation of the owners actually love watchmaking. So it's cool.
Yeah, that is nice to see. And he's got the whole family working hard in that group now, or hardly working. I'm not sure which way around it goes. But I have another question for you. This is a good one. This is from Suzanne, came in via email, and it's kind of follows on from like Daniel Roth and being owned by LVMH, blah, blah, blah. The question is, the retailer Watchbox, so that's the guys in Philly, I think.
Yeah, Govberg in Philadelphia.
Yeah, right. They have already bought watchmaker De Bethune, and they have now bought music box maker Roiger. Do you think that these acquisitions are positive for the industry or not?
Thank you, Suzanne. Actually, interesting question. So the music box maker is Rouge. It's
Is that
R.
how you say it?
I think so. That's how
Rouge.
Rouge. It's French,
Rouge.
I guess,
Sounds
but
like okay.
it could be Reuge. But just to spell it quickly for our listeners, it's Reuge. Very interesting because it's very ironic. We just discussed Gerald Genta and Daniel Roth being bought by a retailer, the Hourglass. I believe it was in the 80s, early 90s, and apparently it didn't really work out. Watchbox very quickly. Govberg is a third, fourth, fifth generation jeweler in the US, Philadelphia, very successful. The father, Danny Govberg, was a visionary. He said pre-owned is going to be big. I believe about a decade ago, he set up with a power player from Hong Kong. I forgot his name. They set up Watchbox as a new entity. They're not a marketplace. They're simply a retailer in pre-owned. They had inventory of over 160 million back in the day. They grew to $250 million stock. Two things they do very well, in my humble opinion, is they started focusing on the indies. And at a certain point, they had the biggest stock in the world of A. Lange & Söhnes, FP Journes, The Bethunes, and maybe Moser. And then the Bethune, I don't think they were struggling, but I think they hit a glass ceiling. And fun fact, it's a Belgian inventor. I forgot his name. I think it's Denis Flo Gaulet, who started the Bethune. And I think they became friends. And Watchbox not so much took it over because they weren't succeeding, but they're helping them to bring them to the next level. And I guess Suzanne's question is it a good or bad thing? Because is it weird that a retailer, especially a pre-owned dealer, buys a brand which does new watches? But I think there's a huge convergence going on in the watchmaking industry on all levels, types of retail, monobrand retail by brands, monobrand e-commerce. Pre-owned is becoming bigger than everything new sold every year. So things are converging literally. Bloggers are becoming powerhouse media players, selling watches, making collabs, becoming dealers. So in that sense, I don't think it's weird. As long as there's synergy, I think it's a good thing. Apparently, Rouge was a bit dormant. I think their collab with MBNF put them back on the map again. If I read correctly, Watchbox did not buy it in totality. So they didn't buy 100% of the shares. They became a majority shareholder. So me personally, as long as there's synergy, I think it's a good thing. And as long as you're transparent about it.
Yeah, I think the transparency is important, and they certainly have been transparent about it. I was racking my brains when I read this question, trying to think of why it could be a bad thing, really. I know, like, maybe the gut response that we always have is to be negative about these things, like, oh, no, that shouldn't happen. A retailer shouldn't buy a brand. But I mean, why shouldn't a retailer buy a brand? I was thinking, is it possible that there's a chance the pre-loved retailer, the retailer of pre-loved objects, should I say, is going to manipulate their own prices to like create a favorable environment for De Bethune? I can't see that being realistic. What do you think? How could it be bad?
Well, originally it was perceived as bad where there were clear lines in the verticals of an industry. So in the watch industry, you had manufacturers, wholesalers, agents, retailers, consumers. Were clear borders between these two that started converging by brands buying their wholesalers and agents. And then they started doing their own monobrand. And then they did the same in e-com, right? And now the first brand ever, I believe, in the luxury industry was Louis Vuitton that verticalized completely. That was A to Z DTC brand, direct to consumer, from A to Z. Everything they did was controlled by them. So that became a role model for many. And I think the first one in the watch industry to do that is Audemars Piguet. So Audemars Piguet started about 5 years ago, canceling dealerships, nice and slow, and they want a full network of monobrand boutiques. Today they call them lofts, so they don't have high street stores, but more of loft space, luxurious new type of retail. and they softened their strategy a bit, where they said in each continent we'll team up with a power player to open a joint venture boutique. So in Singapore, it's Hourglass. In London, I believe they teamed up with Watches of Switzerland, if I'm not mistaken, etc., etc., etc. So taking that analogy, brands working with being bought by retailers would lead to a conclusion that no other dealer would want to sell the brand anymore because they feel disadvantaged. But in a world where everything is now and converging and verticalizing, so meaning that the whole supply chain is dominated by the brand or manufacturer, it's, I think, less of an issue. The Betoon didn't have many dealers, I guess. Brands are cutting dealers worldwide, which is happening to me as well right now as we speak. Mm-hmm. So I don't see that many downsides anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you hit the nail on the head there with your last point, especially your own personal experience of it. Like, so many brands are taking advantage of this verticalization and removing their stock from retailers. There will be no third-party retailers left in the world if it carries on like this. So I think De Betoon could probably walk into many retailers that 10 years ago might have expressed discontent with this relationship that it has with Watchbox. But now I think they'd be like, yeah, of course, if you want to be sold in here, then why not? You sell in here. And yeah, maybe Watchbox has the advantage, the inside track, but so what? They're sharing the love, so that's a good thing.
I wanted to add one thing, if I may, Rob, because it's actually a very interesting discussion. So I salute Watchbox for their transparency in communicating. I do think they're market makers, which they say they do, and which is okay if you're open about it. The cool thing is that they funded the company in several rounds like a startup, of which my idol is Michael Jordan, who is a hardcore watch nerd as well. And like you and I, he loves Urwerk. You see him often rocking his Urwerk watch, which I think is cool. And that being said, I find it a pity that Kering sold off the Kering the So-Wind watch group, which embodies Gérard Perregón, Ulysse Nardin. It was rather sudden, sold off. They called it a management buyout by the CEO of both brands, Patrick Prunillon, and they don't say who the investors are. And I think in today's world, that's a bit of a pity. And I have a feeling there are retailers behind it, and they don't want to say because they think it's a conflict of interest towards the other retailers. And that makes it maybe full circle on the question why it could be negative.
Yeah, but I think overall we are coming down on the positive side, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, Suzanne, there you go. We think it's a good thing. And I suppose maybe the reason why is because De Betoon is a very interesting brand. And whenever interesting brands are allowed to exist, and so is Roige. I forgot how you said it there. Roige. Roige. Yeah, those guys that make some pretty interesting stuff. Actually, if you haven't seen it, you should go check it out. It's not the usual watchmaking fare, but it's decent.
Uber cool. Imagine uber they cool. Were uber cool. They're the old music boxes. I mean, maybe everybody remembers a mechanical ballerina turning around, dancing on music. That's what they originally used to make, but then very detailed and beautiful, composed music.
I think we can say that it's a worthwhile addition to the industry, isn't it, as a brand? Yes. It's good to have it there. We don't need too many of them, but, it's like automatons. Like, they're great to have in the world, but we don't need one on every street corner. So that's that, Suzanne. I'm going to move on to the next question now. This is from William. This also came in via email. I'm not sure where William's from, but hi, William, wherever you're listening. I hope it's a nice sunny day for you today, unless you're allergic to sun. That would be terrible. Okay, his question. Does the brand Linda Verdelin still exist? Lol. And what do you think of the brand? Okay. Alon, does Linda Verdelin still exist?
It's very... I'm laughing.
Yeah, it's snide. It's such a snide question from William.
No.
Yeah, it does, William.
Well, yeah, it does. But you know what?
It's a fair question. I had to check.
No, you're laughing. I literally... I don't know why. I was pondering that question myself because I am actually a huge fan of both Mr. Linda and Mr. Verdelin. They're two Scandinavian gentlemen that are rock and roll They went to London. They took the market by storm.
Mm-hmm.
I remember vividly with our mutual friend Robert Jan Broer that we had a whole discussion about it, why it's cool and they should deserve more recognition. And I haven't heard from both gentlemen, the brand, or anybody, and I haven't seen their watches pop up anywhere. So I had to look when that question popped into my mind, and that's why I laughed when I saw this question coming in by email by William. That I'm like, did they? I don't think they went bust or bankrupt or belly up. I don't think they dissolved the company. So yeah, I think they're up and running. And you know what? I think we should invite them on the show, Rob.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm a fan actually of the watches themselves, but I'll tell you this: I'm not so much a fan that I've actually bought one, and I think that's kind of the problem that Linda Verdlin have experienced because I think the brand is really struggling. If I'm being frank, because that's a big thing, a big statement on both of our parts to actually have to check. You know what I mean? Like, we would know. Like, we are, I think it's fair to say, and I think our audience will forgive me for saying this, but we're quite keyed into the watchmaking industry. You know, we have our ear close to the ground. We generally know what's going on with any brand you care to mention. Now, this is a brand that we've both got, you know, a soft spot for, have loved certain models from in the past. I love the general aesthetic. And I think that that's that there was always, I believe there was always a place for Linda Verdlin in the industry. But again, like I say, I never bought one. I was never even close. And I think that people want brands like that to exist, but they rarely put their money into them. And that's a problem. And that's something I realized myself when I was thinking about brands like, say, Schofield, for example. Now, I love Schofield. And I want Schofield to exist. And when I started to realize like the economics of a brand like that, I realized how important it was that if I want a brand like that to exist, I need to buy the products. Because if you don't, those companies cease to exist. And I think Linda Verdlin is probably on the way out.
I apologize to our listeners that find it annoying that I spell so much, but I got so much feedback from listeners that they love to Google what brand we're talking about. And if we go too fast or don't pronounce it properly, they don't know what we're talking about. So very quickly, Linde Verdeling is Linde, new word, Werdelin. And that's those two stuck together.com. They're Danish, started in 2002. So we're talking about 21 years down the line. I remember vividly 20 years ago, I saw the first watch ever, mechanical automatic watch with little keyholes on the bezel, and you can click in a board computer.
Oh, that was so cool.
You remember that?
Yeah, they were my favorites.
Those were freaking awesome.
Yeah, it's top. Bring that back.
Exactly. So they were OG, innovative. They were skiers, Danish skiers. They loved it. They wanted it. Even without the board computer, the watch was freaking cool. It had this 70s vibe. Call it a bit AP-ish, la la la. But they had their own, or they still have their own signature design line. They have a right of existence. In the end, I wanted to become a dealer. I negotiated with the gents. I don't know. It never worked out. I don't even remember why, but I think it's super cool. Do you remember the Spidolite titanium?
How could I forget? I mean, Spidolite is just, that's what I think of when I think past the clip-on computers. Yeah,
exactly. So guys, go Google it. Let us know if you want them on the show, and we'll promise you we'll ask them straight out. These guys are cool. They can handle us. They're Danish. They're tough as hell. They're neo-Vikings. We can ask them straight up, guys, do you still exist? And they'll laugh and they'll answer.
So I hope they laugh. I hope they laugh and I don't burst out crying. That would be a terrible start to an interview.
No. I'm actually very curious what their evolution is. So I'm going to forward them this episode the day it goes live. So hereby promised on air. Okay, Rob, I have a question for you. Our buddy Christopher Didriksen.
All right, Chris.
And really, Chris, we appreciate your love. You are the OG. Every episode you share on your Instagram stories, and we really, really appreciate the passion.
He's basically part of the team now.
Yeah, almost. What he asks, what would you, Rob and Alon, do if you didn't work in the watch/jewelry industry? Guessing Rob would be a pilot. Wink.
I am a pilot. Yeah. I am a pilot.
Okay, so you say that very often, Rob. Who do you pilot? Your drone? You're in your dreams? Where do you pilot to? Sitting in a plane every week doesn't make you a pilot.
You know, I don't know if I told you this, but I crashed my drone in the Arctic recently. I lost it. Did I tell you that?
Yeah, with Fortis, right?
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, Fortis is where I started being renowned as a world famous pilot, thanks to Fortis ambassador Marc Rollier, who is a pilot. He's actually a pilot. He actually flies a plane. He and I went up in his 2-seater experimental plane, the Turbine Legend, and were doing some loops and barrel rolls and nose dives and tricks above the Alps in Switzerland, which was pretty cool. And he let me fly the plane a little bit to to our destination. I wasn't actually doing any tricks, but I did have the controls for a couple of minutes. And so ever since then, I have tongue in cheek reminded people at every turn that I am a pilot, even though I don't have a pilot's license. I cannot take off or land. I definitely am not to be trusted at the controls of an aviation machine, but I have flown a plane for a couple of minutes, so I'm a pilot. But it's almost got me into a lot of trouble a couple of times because I went on a hot air balloon ride recently, and I was wearing my flight suit, which I bought after I became a pilot with Mark as a joke, and I wore it on my first trip to the Arctic with Fortis, and I wore it to this hot air balloon ride. And because it's green and I had a Swiss military patch on the shoulder, the pilot of the balloon thought I was from the Swiss Air Force. And in my broken German, I confirmed his suspicions that I was actually a Swiss pilot.
Dude, you're doing illegal stuff now on air. You know that, right? And the whole Swiss industry is listening to our podcast.
It's not the kind of illegality that people care about. Like when somebody accidentally pretends to be a Swiss pilot in the middle of Saxony, I don't think anybody gives a damn. But my co-passengers on this balloon flight might have ended up giving a damn because this guy suddenly decided that I was qualified to fly a balloon. If I could fly like a jet plane, he was like, "Oh, you can help me with the balloon flying." And he was asking me for like readouts on the computer when we were up there. And I'd never been in a balloon before, so I just kind of winged it, ironically, got away with it, pulled off an amazing landing of a balloon with these 5 other passengers in place. And he never knew. He never knew that I wasn't a pilot. I seemed to get away with it, so I'm sticking with it now. And it's just a running joke, especially with Fortis. Every time there's an aircraft of any description, be it like a drone or a microlight or a helicopter, like they always look to me to volunteer to fly it, even though I really shouldn't.
I know why you're doing that, because on the next space experiment Fortis does, you don't only want to be invited, you actually want to join in the cabin of the space shuttle. I know
I'd love to be an astronaut. Yeah, I would. I would go if I was offered. About 10 years ago, no, not that long, 7 years ago or so, Ed Malan actually offered me the chance to go on that parabolic flight that was quite famously spread around the media by Moser when it occurred. But at the time, you wouldn't believe this, I was mortally terrified of flying. I was scared of flying my entire life until I got the job with Nomos and was forced to fly like 200 times a year.
Really?
Yeah, I was so scared. Like I would avoid flying at all times. I hadn't been on a plane for I don't know how many years, 5 or 6 years at the time, and I would do stupid stuff like I would take trains across Europe to avoid flying. So I said no to Moser, and I regret that ever since. It's the biggest regret that I actually have in the watch industry.
So how did you overcome that fear, Rob?
Oh, well, I got lucky. On the way out of Basel, one year, it was the first year I was with Nomos, so it was 2016. I was sat next to an air traffic controller called Hans from Karlsruhe, and he could tell that I was a bit of a nervous flyer, and he asked if I would like to talk about it. And I asked him all the questions I'd ever had about planes and the sounds they make and the feelings that you get, like when you are up above the clouds and the plane seems to drop 50 feet or something suddenly, or the engine sound changes, or you can hear this whirring near the back door, and what's this, that, and the other. And he answered all my questions, allayed all my fears. And ever since, now that I understand aviation a lot more, I've become a bit of a nut, a bit of a flight nut. I love flying now. I absolutely adore it. And I'm a pilot, so yeah, whatever. Anyway, to the question, I haven't answered it yet because I wouldn't be a pilot, as amusing as that is. But what would you be?
I always wanted to become a jeweler, an entrepreneur and jeweler. I've never worked for somebody else. I actually have always been a jeweler. I've been literally crawling as a baby on the shop floor working summers from age 12. I mean, I grew up with the G-Shock Swatch era. And at the age of 12, I don't know if you remember that, Rob, the moon swatch things we see now seem rare. But back in the late 80s, beginning 90s, when they came out, the chronos, we had exactly the same mania. It was literally swatch mania. We would buy parallel, although we were swatch dealers, but we couldn't get the chronos. Parallel from the US, Italy, chronograph. So back in the, I remember it vividly, was 850 guilders, which today is around 400 something euros. Although they were retailing quarter of the price, and then sell them off. So the gray business started with the swatches and the frenzy and the flipping and the parallel. It was funny and amazing. And so I always wanted to be an entrepreneur and jeweler. You know, I daydreamed a bit. What would I do? For a brief moment when I was in uni, study economics, and I studied in the US and lived there, I thought about doing M&A banking, but I very quickly let go of that idea. I am not really creative. I'm not jealous, but I admire creativity. Hence why I get so excited on this show when we have designers and or watchmakers on the show. They are magicians. I admire them. I admire creativity. So that's something I really, really appreciate. And if it wasn't in this industry, and I think that both goldsmiths and jewelry makers and watchmakers are architects. So if it had to be something outside this industry, it will be architecture in the classic sense of the word. So making buildings. So I'm a huge fan of architecture. And a backup would be a photographer. I admire photographers. Today, everyone with a phone is a amateur photographer. And if you take your socials a bit seriously, you admire any photographer, right? So if I had to mention two icons that I admire, I guess it's architect Geary and photographer is Lindbergh for me.
Are you a good photographer?
I think I have a skill to be a good entry-level amateur. I don't give myself the time. I do have a great Canon kit. When I went twice on safari with my wife, I made Nat Geo level photos of wildlife.
Nice.
Which one of them actually got featured on the Nat Geo website.
Wow.
If it doesn't pop up in Google anymore, I'll have to use the time machine on the internet. But I have proof somewhere that I made it to the Nat Geo website.
Well, that's a pretty high bar.
Yeah. Obviously on the amateur section. Yeah, they didn't pay for my picture, but it was a competition. So and this is a shout out in the watch industry. I think one of the best photographers, amateur, hobbyists in the watch industry is, I think his handle is Palio Pelle on Instagram. It's I think he's retiring now, but the museum director of Omega, our Greek friend. Have you met him?
No, I've never met him. I don't think I have. I suppose the only chance I might have done would have been 2012. Would he have been there then?
Yeah, definitely. So we need to see if we can get him on the show. He's an amazing guy, and he's an amazing photographer, and he does Hasselblad gray monochrome scale photography, and that's why I like Lindbergh. I think if you can make images that speak not 1,000 words, but 1,000,000 words in not moving images, so photos on a grayscale, you're amazing. And unfortunately, I am aware of the quality differences between entry-level Canon, Nikon, Leica, and then Hasselblad, and it's a curse because a lot of watch nerds love photography as well, and that's also an expensive hobby. So long story short, am I good? No. Would I love to spend more time on this hobby? Yes.
Good answer. Very good answer.
And what about you, Rob? Besides you thinking that you're a pilot, an imposter.
Yeah, I wouldn't be a pilot. It's an interesting question because every so often, if you're pushing hard enough in your career, you always come up against moments where you have to ask yourself, am I going to continue to push in this way, maybe it's time for me to leave this industry and do something else. So I actually have thought about it in quite a practical way relatively recently. I suppose I have to apply a level of reality to the question, right? So, like, if I could choose to be anything, I would have been a Pro Bowl level running back or wide receiver in the NFL and have like 4 or 5 Super Bowl rings to my name. But if I'm being realistic, I mean, my dream job has always been to be a writer, but I guess I am a writer, so it's a bit of a cop out if I say, well, I'm not gonna be a watchmaker or a podcast host. I'm going to be a writer. That's already a massive component of my life and my professional undertaking. So if I had to do something else, I always loved being a barman. And I always thought I'd like to be a landlord of a pub. And recently I've even taken up cooking. And although I don't like to eat very much myself and have a very strange relationship with food, I do like to cook for other people. And I really enjoy making breakfast treats for people. I don't know why. I honestly don't know why. And I watch Kitchen Impossible with my girlfriend sometimes because she loves it. And I've been fascinated by some of the confectionery odysseys that certain maestros go on to perfect their craft. And I've seen some amazing stuff, some patisserie that really blows my mind. I would quite like to pursue that maybe. But if I were to stop watchmaking now, if I were to say, okay, this is the last episode of the Real Time Show, I'm giving up and I'm going off into the wilderness and I'm going to do something else, I would go into the fossil industry with my father, who is a well-known geologist, paleontologist, and I would become a dinosaur broker and arrange sales for dinosaur specimens between diggers, preparators, and either private clients or academic institutions. So I'd be somewhere a mix between the pilot I am now, Indiana Jones, and Dr. Alan Grant, I guess. That's without the whip, or maybe with the whip. Actually, I'll take the whip and the Velociraptor claw. Okay, that's what I do.
That's amazing. So from now on, your dad actually is my son's hero. So he's full in the dino swing of things. That's actually very interesting. But I want to state this on the record. I joke a lot with and about Rob, but I have a very high esteem and regard of him, and I love him for the fact that everything he doesn't do well, doesn't do above average. He does it near excellence. So if you guys don't know Rob that well, he really is a watchmaker. I was obviously joking at the beginning of the episode that about the neighborhood watchmaker and the friendliness. He is friendly unless things don't go his way, and then he's freaking cranky and an a-hole to deal with. I get a lot of #MeToo banter behind the scenes, and David can vouch for that.
It's because you don't understand the hashtag.
Yeah, whatever.
Or you willfully misunderstand it, and like you use it in a way that if anybody but us saw it, they'd have your guts for garters, mate.
Yeah, whatever. Anyways, but he is a journalist. I'm not, and I don't have the ambition to become one. I do admire word magicians because journalists and writers are literally magicians with word and very creative. He does that really well. Obviously, he's good on the mic. That's why I asked him to come on the show with me. Yeah. This is not a joint project. No, I'm kidding. So, no, but I actually wouldn't want to do this show with anybody else. And the funny thing is, I've been asked many times to set up a new show, and I've said no. And the timing was just right. And very organically, we came up with this idea together, Rob and I. And yeah, you hear him sometimes bragging that he makes jewelry for Christmas for his family, but he really does that. And it seems sometimes he does too much. And same goes for me. But I think that's the beauty of being an independent entrepreneur. And you have the luxury to do what you like. And that's the reason why we also do this podcast. We just jumped in, heads in first into the cold water, and we'll see where it takes us because it gives us joy and energy.
Have you got a point?
No, I just wanted to say, buddy, I love you.
I love you too, man. I love you too.
Okay, enough with the bromance now.
Okay.
All
Here's
right,
a
next
question for
one.
you. Next one from Edward. And he says, quite simply, when is the Rolex bubble going to burst? Well, I think it's popped already. What do you think?
Interesting question, and it's a rather bold statement. So let's define it a bit. What's a bubble? Bubble means that is too much hot air in a balloon or a bubble, right? And it's not natural, it can't sustain. For me, the baseline is every watch that sells above list price goes into inflation and therefore inflates literally a balloon, a hot air balloon. Now, these deltas we've seen, delta, I mean, in a financial term, the big difference between nominal value and market value, let's say, for the sake of it. So it's a parity, a difference in price or value. We've never seen such a parity, a delta, since COVID in watchmaking in general, especially on the three top brands. I don't want to use the word Holy Trinity because that's a big discussion we have on this show because who belongs in the Holy Trinity? But the majority thinks it's Patek Philippe, Rolex, and Audemars Piguet.
No, they don't. The majority does not think that.
People think that those three are in the Holy Trinity. When they're new to watchmaking, the biggest delta during the last 3 years were on these three brands. And that's the analogy that flows out for them, okay? Due to just market value and commoditizing the products these brands make. Now, the delta is coming down hard, and I don't think we're done yet. So, yes, I agree with you, Rob. It burst already. But where do we stop or where will it normalize? I think we're going to see that for especially these three brands and maybe all other brands, we're going back to where the aftermarket pricing goes towards market list price, so recommended retail price, RRP. So I think it burst. I don't think we've seen the end of it. What do you think, Rob?
Well, that's interesting because that is what I was most interested to hear from you. Do you think we've seen the end of it or not? Because
No.
I think, I mean, we can definitely see that we've come down off the top of the mountain, right? I mean, there's been an obvious slide in the last few months, and I am actually glad to see it. I sold my one Rolex at like the right time, it would seem, and I was looking at models similar to it recently, and I was amazed to see that they tumbled already, and that I could buy back the same thing for a couple of thousand less than what I sold it for, which was just nuts. But where is the floor? Now, will we ever get to a point where a second-hand Rolex trades for less than a new one again?
They do actually.
In which models do? Which models do?
So that's very interesting. So I have very fierce discussions with my team, the ACE team. Should we or shouldn't we do TikTok? La 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 la. I'm not such a fan. But okay, I did my homework, so I start following a bit, posting a bit, and I'm blown away by this whole new trend that's only goes on TikTok, especially New York on 47th Street, where dealers film themselves haggling over B2B, gray market sales of especially Rolexes. So I find that very intriguing. Now, I saw a post come up, an English guy in Dubai, teaching people not to buy the following 5 Rolex models at RRP because you would be stupid, because those 5 actually sell in Dubai for less. And he was talking about the Sky Dweller Ever Rose on rubber. He was talking about the Submariner yellow gold blue bezel. He was talking about, I forgot the other 3, but surprisingly, he didn't even talk about a Cellini model either. But they're coming down. Let me give you a real life example. We had a customer who commissioned us an Explorer 1 36 millimeters, full stickers, unsized, even the plastic protective bezel on the lunette. He wanted 9,450. Autumn. Pricing came down. We sold already 3 others in the time being, but this guy's watch wasn't moving because he wanted the top price for it. Actually, today, we sold it at 8,500.
Mm-hmm.
That's, let's say, about what? 1,500 above RRP. I believe RP is around 7-ish for that watch. So I asked the buyer, why did you buy it? Why are you paying premium? I'm very honest in my selling, always have been, especially on pre-owned watches. I tell people, you buy it, pay attention. You're buying way above RRP. Don't you want to wait for it? because I feel that my integrity is compromised if I don't say that, right?
Yeah.
We're not here in the business of money grab. So we buy pre-owned, we trade in pre-owned, we commissioned, we get consigned, and we buy, and etc. We do everything, full service. But we always manage expectations. So the majority of people say, hey, I'm willing to pay 10, 20% above RRP because I don't want to wait. And the majority of the people that buy these at these prices are actually not that stupid. They say, hey, Rolex goes up on average 7 to 10% every year.
Yeah.
Right? And we've seen price increases all over the board 2-3 times last year. And I mean, this year already, we're not even at the end of Q1. And almost every brand did a price increase already in January, February, and March. So are they that stupid? Actually, they're not that dumb, because if you look at the future cash flow model, they already embedded the future price when they finally are eligible to go to an AD to pick up their watch. They're paying the same price, but in this time being, they enjoyed it on their wrist for 1 or 2 years, or 3 years, or 5 years. So actually, are they that stupid? And then I'm like, hey, I never looked at it that way. I'm always opposed to pay above list. That's something that I've been raised with, right?
Right.
So I think it's a good thing the bubble is coming down. What is, I think, organic and natural? Indeed, what these guys say and girls, maybe 1 to 3 years of price increase embedded in today's price is nominal for them the same, but at least they can enjoy it, right? And since interest is coming up, but still, the money in the bank costs you money still today, even with the increased interest rates. So their analogy is, let me give my money off the bank. I'll pay a bit more now, but it's a double win for them. They don't lose money on the bank, and they can enjoy it for 2-3 years on their wrist. And the watch appreciates anyways.
It's an interesting way of looking at it, and a good way, certainly something that I will think about in the future, because it isn't something that I've ever considered when it comes to paying over list now. The fact that over list price will one day be list price, and you'll have the watch in the interim period. Yeah, food for thought. But to answer, or to at least put a hat on the question, let's say, of Edward, I can't predict exactly where the floor will be, and I'm sure that the floor for all models will be slightly different, and it will largely come down to supply. If Rolex is able or desirous of increasing, if Rolex is able or wants to increase production, then if Rolex is able to or wants to increase production, then I imagine that they will knock off a big chunk of value on the pre-owned market, but I'm not sure that that's really Rolex's goal right now. Certainly not an urgent goal on their side of things. They're doing what they can to control the market, but they aren't looking to solve all of its ills overnight. So, yep, watch this space.
I want to add something, Rob, because what you said is very interesting. So Rolex is really hedging it, and it means the market and demand and supply. They are apparently building a whole new factory that could take up 3,000 new employees. And I've heard stories, not from Rolex, but that's speculation in the market. So it's not from primary source. So it's hearsay, which I don't like, but okay. For the sake of the hypothesis, let's say they'll amp up their production by 20%. The rumors are, or it's been said, that they produce about 1 million wristwatches a year. So they'll go up in the next decade to 1.2 million. That's a rather hefty jump, I think.
Did you listen to the episode that we recorded with Guillaume Lede?
Yeah. He also said that, didn't he?
Well, he said he had some solid figures in there, straight from the horse's mouth, to be honest.
You're right.
And by the sound of things, they're already at 1.2. So they're actually a little bit higher than we all assumed. I mean, I'd been under the impression for years that they were about 800,000 to 1 million pieces. And I know that's a very broad spectrum. It's a 20% spectrum itself, but that's what I'd always heard and what I'd always been told and what I'd always believed. But sounds like they actually have jacked up production quite significantly in the past. And there's just so many more people that can buy Rolexes these days. They can't keep up with that. or don't want to. I don't know.
Yeah, very well. So Rob is referring to the episode that he recorded with Guillaume Ladet, the CEO of Nevada Grenchen and Vulcan and Excelsior Park. Check it out on our website, The Real Time Show. So that's www.therealtime.show. So yeah, he said that indeed, because I think he spoke to the fool. So okay, very good. At least I didn't say it. So let me go back to my analogy and my hypothesis. So they are going to jump up even more. But I think their hedge is they're protecting the bottom side or the market by introducing that certified pre-owned program that they launched a few months, weeks ago. So yeah, very interesting. I would love to hear from our listeners. What do you think about paying more than list price for watches? So I would love to see those questions and or feedback come into our mailbag. Rob, next question.
Okay, we have time for one more item on the show today. It's not so much a question, although I'm going to turn it into a question. I received a press release from my friend Peter Howarth of Show Media London the other day, and I would like to share what was in that press release with you because it concerns one of our very good friends and a former guest of the show. That's George Bamford. Now, Bamford has released with Thomas Pink, a famous German street shirt maker in England, a new GMT. And I've got some images for you, Alon, if you'd like to take a look at them in front of you there. So what we have here is an automatic titanium GMT watch with an internal rotating bezel, powered by the Sellita SW330-2, which has 25 joules, 28,800 VPH, and a 56-hour power reserve. Now, it's got a blasted case, a sort of bead blasted case, or media blasted case, as we say these days, to be a little less specific. Very, very nice. It comes with either a white dial or a black dial. There'll be 30 pieces of each made, and it has beautiful baby pink, Thomas Pink inspired accents on the tip of the GMT hand and also on the seconds hand and also at 12 o'clock, and it has the pink logo between center and 6. Little obscure date window at 3 o'clock, not too shouty. Comes on what looks like a black fabric strap and also with a black rubber strap in the box as well. Price is £1,700 GBP, and it is available from the store. So you can find that store, Thomas Pink, 106 Jermyn Street, London, SW1Y6EE. Opening times 10:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m.
Hashtag no advertisement.
Well, it's not an advertisement. I mean, it's an advertisement. I'm sharing the release of this watch. It's not a paid advertisement. It's just because I think it's interesting and it's from a friend and it's about a friend's latest effort. And it's interesting for me because I'm a big fan of cross-industry collaboration, as I've always said. So I like stuff like this and I wanted to present it in a very official manner because I want to hear what you think. I want you to take a look at the watch. Do you like the watch? Do you like the project? Do you like the collab? Go ahead.
Who has listened to the episode with George Bamford knows that both Rob and I are friends with George. We like him. We love him. And there's not much that I don't like what he does. I bought the Cookie Monster version of the Bamford London for my son. I'm a victim of our own show because every time we do an episode, I get more excited about whomever we speak to in watchmaking, and I freaking buy more watches. So after that episode, I ordered the collab with Land Rover, the Range Rover, the Land Rover with Bamford. It still didn't come in. So George, if you're listening to this episode, where the heck is my watch? So okay, I am a sucker for titanium. So and Thomas Pink, I like the brand. I used to buy their shirts in New York and London, so I see it as a upper tier mid-range brand. It's luxurious. Their font used to be this banknote font, but on the dial of this watch, I see they have a new font. I think it's actually cool. It's a very tranquil dial. It's very tranquil for Bamford standards. The case shape, I wouldn't imagine Pink going for it because I see them as a classical brand, Savile Row-ish, but then a bit more dandy, okay? And then I'm like, oh yeah, they're a bit dandy-esque. And the Bamford case is dandy-esque. I wouldn't think they would go for titanium because titanium is seen a bit tool watch-y.
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought they would go for steel polished. I think it's very cool. I think the pink works very well with the silver white-ish dial. Yeah, fun. And I think we had many discussions on this show with George and all others, including Second. And these two are the king and emperor of collabs, and we can decide whom takes the reign, right? But I'm giving the emperor title to George, and then Second takes the king title. But again, my stance is as long as it adds value, the more, the better, right? So
Right.
if 60 pink fans will pick up this watch, good for them. Welcome to the watch collecting world. Will watch collectors buy this? I don't think so, unless their surname is pink, or all their dress shirts are made by pink, or if they love the color pink.
Well, I think that's quite a broad demographic that you just described there. And I finally understand your comment to Romaric on last week's episode. When you said he'd taken George's crown, I was thinking, whoa, shots fired at Bamford's. Oh, how's this going to go down? Well, we'll leave it in because with a real-time show, we have no choice. We've got to keep it real. Now I see what you meant was he's taken George's place and George has ascended to the role of Holy Emperor, overseeing the. I see it now. I get it. Okay,
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
the whole ecosystem.
It was a bit of a dab towards George because I know he's a fan of our show, and it was a bit of that. But Romaric, the founder of Second, the man behind the show, he's not there yet. Okay, I mean, come on, George has a long track record, and he's done amazing things. And the big difference for our listeners. George morphed into a watchmaker as well. He has a brand. He has an own atelier. I've been there, the Hive in Mayfair, London. He literally has an atelier there, guys. So this is not a fancy marketing brand that pretends, or it's not an imposter. Now,
Yeah.
Second is not a watch brand. He doesn't have the ambition to become one, although we urge him on the show to do so. But he's getting there. But they do a different thing. And for the record, they are mates, they're buddies, and they made collabs together as well, right? So
yeah. Well. You urged him to start his own brand. Maybe I don't think he should personally, but it's good that there's two opinions there, as always, in this show.
No, he should. He should.
Well, there you go.
I think one day we all of us will be a bit tired of the high tide of collabs, and I am very much at fault as well because at Ace we did 5 years, 6 years, one a year. This year we have already 7 confirmed, and it might be that like Romaric, I'm gonna go to one a month. And with the real-time show, you and I also want to do one. So we're also at fault at feeding this. Do I dare to say bubble?
Well, I don't see it as fault because I like it, because I don't think that you can do too much of a good thing, really, in that way. I think as long as it's relevant and to people, to buyers, to watch fans, then more power to it. I just don't see the reasoning behind the limitation of limitation when it's attractive to so many people.
Me too. But George hedged that risk of a trend fading. Okay, let me not call it a bubble. But Romaric, what is he going to do if brands don't want it, consumers don't want it anymore? And he's so fantastic. He's an artist.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
I'm not worried about him. Yeah, his creativity will pour in another direction. But he lives and breathes watches. That's what he loves. So it would be a shame if we would lose him to another industry. That's what I'm saying.
I suppose it's possible, but I think that there's a lot of life left in that concept yet, and I think that there's loads of brands that you can approach and work with. And like you say, he is an artist, and his style, as we learned on the show last week, his style is really informed by his own limitations as an artist. By his own admission, he doesn't draw, and he's not particularly skilled with like computer design software, and so he really found a way to use more analog materials to his advantage, and it's fascinating to watch. I think that there's there's plenty of space for him. You see, because I think that his brand is that master collaborator. It's different from George. It's very different. I know you're comparing them and contrasting them in different ways, and you are like explaining at length the nuances of their different trajectories in the industry. But he is Romarek is definitely like an excellent addition. He's like the secret sauce to something, whereas Bamford could be the something, especially in the cases like this watch itself. I've been staring at this Bamford Pink collab, and there is something that was weird about it. It stuck out to me from the outset, but I wasn't sure what it was or whether I knew what I was looking at. I believe, if you take a look at this, I believe that GMT hand is loomed, right?
Yeah.
And the hour and the minute hands are not.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. And I'm sure our listeners will have something to say about the functionality of that, but I think that that's kind of cool that it places the GMT complication in a position of absolute importance above all else. So, I like it.
And you know what? If I had to guess why that is done, I think the 80% of the clientele of Pink is literally flying over the Atlantic, London, New York.
But the interesting thing is, when you look at the black dial one, it appears that the hand has a black infill instead and doesn't look to be loomed. Curious. I like it. I'm all for it. I think that it's a surprising choice by Pink to choose this titanium blasted case. As you mentioned, it's a very tool-ish look, but I'm really taken by it. I think it's refreshing. I love the pairing of this watch with the green velvet jacket in the press release. That's class, to be honest. And if I had to choose between the white and the black, I would take the black one. All right, I think that's going to wrap it up for today, isn't it? It's been an exciting show. There's been some good questions, and we took them in some odd directions, as we often do. Thanks for the energy today. That was really a memorable episode, and good to pick up the conversation of the king and emperor of customization once more, because that's always a lot of fun. All right, we'll be back next week as usual with another Q&A and an interview with one of watchmaking's finest. If you'd like to get in touch in advance of those shows and be part of the Real Time Show, you can contact us on Instagram. I'm there at RobNuds, that's ROBNUDDS, and Alon is findable at ALONBENJOSEPH. Alternatively, you can contact us via email, either rob@therealtime.show or alon@therealtime.show. We will see you soon. Until then, stay safe and keep on ticking.